We do not know why we are here. We do not know who built the silo. We do not know why everything outside the silo is as it is. We do not know when it will be safe to go outside. We only know that day is not today. This is the No Fear podcast. We know what scares you.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Mel.
And this is the No Fear Cast, the podcast where we dissect horror and all the things that scare us. This is the third and final episode in our series on dystopian horrors, and we will be discussing the first several episodes of the TV show Silo. All right, so like I said in the introduction, we're going to be covering, I said the first several episodes, but specifically, we'll be covering the first 2 episodes of the TV show Silo. If you're not familiar with it, we mentioned it in passing in our first episode on dystopian horror and decided that we wanted to actually focus in on it for this last episode that we're doing, partly because they just wrapped their second season. It just finished airing, and it was really good, but also because it's a good example of dystopian horror. And so we'll be covering just the first 2 episodes of the first season, where we're not going to go in depth through all the episodes. And as I started to say, if you're not familiar with it, it is a TV show that's on Apple TV Plus. So if you don't have a subscription to that, you would need to do that, or a free month trial to watch it. I believe it's 12 episodes per season, so it's pretty relatively bingeable in a free month trial period sort of thing. But just to kind of give some background on it, this is actually, it's based on a trilogy of books by an author named Hugh Howey. And just as kind of a side note of trivia, it was actually began the very first book he published first as a short story, which he then expanded on into a full-fledged novel. And he, I believe, self-published them through Amazon. And the bit of trivia is that there was a sale on the first book on the Amazon Kindle store back in I think it was like 2015 or something like that. I don't remember the year, but the book was on sale for $1.99, and Wool is the name of the book. It was literally the first book I ever purchased from the Kindle store, because I had a Kindle for about a week at the time when I saw that it was on sale. And I read the review and was like, this sounds interesting. So I paid $2 and read the book, and proceeded to read the other 2 in the trilogy immediately thereafter. So, like I said, the story is the novel is named Wool. The other 2 in the series are called Shift and then Dust. They were published in 2011, and then Shift and Dust was in 2013, both of them. And the story takes place in the namesake of the TV show, which I understand why they changed the name. The title of the book, Wool, sounds a bit confusing. I mean, wool is a fabric. It's something we get from sheep. What does it have to do with dystopia? I feel like Silo does give you a bit better concept of what it is, but it's also a little misleading. So something we'll talk about in the episode, I'm sure, is the fact that it takes place exclusively in an underground silo. And by underground silo, I don't mean like a backyard bomb shelter. It is, I think they mention it at one point in the series, it's 160 floors beneath the earth, circular living space underground for, I don't know if they mentioned it in the first 2 episodes, but I think it's roughly 10,000 humans, all living underground, because we don't know why outside is uninhabitable. We just know that it is uninhabitable, or we think it's uninhabitable. That's probably something we'll discuss. But yeah, there's a lot to the story that lends itself to very strongly to the dystopian horror that we've been talking about in these last two episodes. And so I think, it's definitely a good fitting way to kind of wrap up the series on Dystopia. Now, I have obviously said that I've read the source material, all three books that were the basis. I've watched both seasons of the TV show. I would definitely consider myself a fan. Love the show. Think it's very well done. Some amazing acting in it. And now, Mel, I believe this was your first watch through, so I'm gonna just put you on the spot and kind of ask your thoughts and opinions on it, because it's pretty clear that I enjoy the show. I think it's well done, and I want to get your insight and your thoughts as a brand new viewer.
Sure. Yeah, this was my first time watching Silo. I only watched the first two episodes, even though I immediately wanted to watch the third as soon as I finished the second one. I'm hooked. I very much enjoyed it. Um, and now I'm kind of in the situation where the books had been on my radar for a bit, because I remember you telling me about the books, I think off and then off the podcast, but then I think you mentioned them when we were doing an episode on the podcast a while back. And so I had them in the back of my mind that I wanted to read them at some point. And then when you really like the show, I'm the type of person who likes to read things before I watch them. But when we talked about including it in this series, I was like, I'm going to go ahead. I actually just recently got Apple TV, so I could watch Severance. So I just picked up on Silo after that. And yeah, I'm going to watch more, and I'm going to read the books, I think, as well. So I guess I'll give some of my first impressions. I really like that it's dystopian for sure. I mean, they're getting ready to celebrate Freedom Day, which is kind of an interesting naming for anything. They keep talking about how things from before the rebellion are forbidden. Throughout the course of the first episode, we get an idea that there's kind of a surveillance state going on. People are afraid that people are listening to them. There are things they feel like they can't say. Supposedly these rebels, they don't understand why, destroyed all their knowledge in this rebellion, like what was it, 100 something years before. And so they're just going along thinking that they cannot leave this silo. And it's really interesting. I mean, it kind of reminded me in a way of like space stations, like Deep Space Nine or Babylon 5 or something. I mean, there's this whole kind of world inside this silo of marketplaces and apartments and people going to work and all this stuff. But they also have their own little kind of closed society and culture because of this history and because of the fact that it's so insular and they can't get out. And so I think there, like I mentioned, there were a couple things that really kind of pull me in. One, of course, is dystopia, which we're talking about. But the other is the mystery aspect of it. The fact that for good or ill, whether there's the mysterious judicial and the powers that be, which are a bit scary, or just people who don't know the history, so they don't know exactly what's going on, and this is just their life. Um, the characters don't know the things that we don't know as a viewer. And so I feel like from watching the first two episodes that the kind of point of the show is going to be following people who are testing this society, the situation, and hopefully finding out more about what happened before, because we have one relic, like an old hard drive that people are trying to access in episode one, and to kind of find out what's going on in the before times, as I think they call it. But yeah, it's really interesting to have a whole kind of society living inside this closed insular space who have a long history, we presume, but we also don't understand that history because they don't either. So yeah, I'm the type of person who kind of enjoys this kind of, I guess, darker, kind of almost sci-fi or fantasy feel to something. I guess it's not fantasy because it's real world. It seems like whatever happened to them happened around the time that we're in, or maybe a bit before, technology wise. But it definitely has a slightly kind of sci-fi feel or speculative feel to it. married with this mystery aspect. I think that is pretty cool. And then from what I've seen of the books, it sounds like, from what you've said, what I've seen from looking at the books, it sounds like there's a bit of jumping around time. I don't know if they'll handle that in the TV show or if it's going to be straightforward with this kind of competing political philosophies and mysteries. But I liked it. I liked a lot how we kind of get pulled in from the very beginning with the people who are questioning what's going on.
I completely agree with that. I love the mystery aspect of it and the fact that we, the viewer, are finding out everything as it unravels, just like the characters. I think that definitely lends itself to make it very, very interesting. And I definitely wanted to mention too that the author of the book, Hugh Howey, I believe he did either write the screenplay, or I think the teleplay is what they call it, since it's a TV show. He either wrote or consulted on it, so his input was directly involved in the TV adaptation. And one reason why I think that's pretty uh, pretty good for the show is that it's pretty clear after you finish reading the book, even just the first one, that he has done a lot of world building on his own, like that never made it into the book. I feel like he created a very large like backstory for the silo, and not just the events that caused people to be living in the silo, but also the history of the time in the silo itself as well. And they reference this in the first episode by talking about a great uprising that happened 140 years before, and that destroyed all the books in the library, and that people were trying to rush the door to the outside. They felt that it was safe to go out, and the survivors in the silo put down that rebellion and stopped it from happening, and that's what saved them all. Even just that little bit of detail, I feel like he had to have fleshed all of this out before writing it, because the whole world feels really lived in. Like it doesn't feel like there's glossing over of things. Like he feels very, very planned out and calculated. And I really enjoy that in any kind of book, because I mean, just having that layer, that depth, gives it so much more realism and makes it so much more enjoyable. It makes everything feel the opposite of superficial, which I'm struggling to find the word for that. So we'll just say the opposite of superficial. Um, but I guess to kind of turn things a little bit to the topic du jour, since we're including this in our discussion of dystopia, I definitely feel like there's a lot of elements of dystopia that just like permeate throughout this. I mean, there's a very foreboding kind of tone that they take with filming the show. A lot of choices of lighting and color. Everything in the silo is very, very gray cinder block. This kind of like prison feel, or like industrial kind of feel. It doesn't feel homely or lived in. Now, people do have apartments that do feel much more homely and lived in and comfortable, but the great majority of it is very like stark and austere. But Mel, did you have anything you wanted to talk about with the dystopia? Do you want me to just kind of take point here and start the first kind of point I had?
I can jump in a little bit. I don't want to steal your point, but I
Oh
just
no,
was
no.
thinking I was thinking while you were talking. Just for me, when I heard it was called silo, the first thing of course pops into my mind is missile silo, right? And that of course has so many connections to like post-apocalyptic fears and that sort of thing. And anytime you have a lore where a bunch of people wanted to do one thing and they were stopped, it automatically makes you wonder, well, what if those people actually wanted to do the right thing? Like who won, you know? And those two aspects make me feel that, uneasy. Just kind of the connotations of the title, and then the weirdness of the history. But I'll stop there because I don't want to accidentally step on your point that you're going to get into.
Oh no, I think you, and I that's why I feel like titling it Silo is was a really good choice on their part. I like the fact that the book is called Wool. That does make sense with the cleaning, which we'll get into as we get into the episodes directly. But yeah, I mean, I guess the point I was going to make is just the pervading sense of control throughout the silo. I mean, that was kind of the theme of the notes that I was taking as I was rewatching this, because truth be told, I watched the first season when it aired roughly a year and a half ago, and then I watched the second season. I think it started this fall, maybe, but I didn't start watching it until maybe April. But I didn't go back and rewatch the first season. I just kind of read a refresher or watched the, like, last season on Silo kind of thing at the beginning, just to kind of refresh things. So I was taking notes as I was watching this, and it was like control. If I could like underline 1,000 times that word, that really seems to be the overarching theme of at least the government. And I mean, that's a big part of why we chose this, isn't it? But to get more specific, and we can talk about like the plot progression of the first two episodes, because they kind of are kind of a mini story arc of their own. They basically take the story of the first chapter of the book, which was the original standalone short story. So that's also why we did the first two episodes. They tell that story and start getting into the larger story. But to go back, let's see. So the families have to get approval to have children, and it makes sense that this would be a necessity because they have limited space, they have limited resources, but only certain people even get approved to have children. They get a year to have the child, where they have the women have the birth control removed, and they get a year to have a child, and then they can do this 3 different times, and after that, if you don't have a kid, you're done. And in between each of those years, somebody else may get the approval, and so you have to wait, and back goes the birth control. Lots of control there. I mean, lots of control of the body, lots of control of who's having children, who's making the decision to let people, like which couples get to have the children. So I mean, there really are lots of elements of control there. You've got these things that they call relics, which are any items from before this great rebellion from 140 years ago. They are banned. They are not allowed to be had. Like they are a punishable offense to own them. And so is pretty much talking about any history prior to this rebellion, which, I mean, that has echoes of Orwell just all over it, because if you can't discuss history and can't have knowledge of the history, who's to say that the history that you're being told hasn't been fabricated to some degree or another? And kind of one of the last like major points I would even say is what they keep calling judicial, the law enforcement branch. I mean, they have eyes and ears everywhere. People are kind of always on guard not to say the wrong thing that might attract the attention of judicial, even if it is something innocuous. They don't want to phrase it badly because they don't want the attention from judicial on them. I mean, this sounds very much like all of the things that we've talked about in the last two episodes. I kind of feel like I'm dominating this right now, just going through all of these points. So, Mel, I'm going to step back, let you kind of respond a bit, and we can kind of conversate.
Sure. No, I like these points that you're bringing up because I think a pervasive sense of control and a fear of surveillance is really important to this. And also the fact that it's necessary, like literally necessary for their survival, that they all think the same thing. We find out in in the second episode, there's all these things that are like crimes, like their relationships have to be approved, like you said. If you're gonna have a child, it has to be approved. We find out in the second episode that trying to figure out if a character was murdered or committed suicide or it was an accident. They really want it to be an accident because apparently suicide is illegal and murder means there's something wrong in the society. And so, yeah, there's almost like thought control. There's a lot of like ritual in the society. In the first episode, when they're celebrating Freedom Day, they have a specific speech that the mayor gives. They all then have particular parts that they play in this, in the different ways that they remember their history or don't since it's gone. There's a lot of like groupthink and kind of uniformity going on. And we see little ways that people are rebelling or are afraid. But yeah, there's a lot of just kind of enforced homogeneity in this silo. And I think you're right too about the power of words, and that's why it's so strict with what they say at certain times and do at certain times. And so one of the other things I thought was interesting is this, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but the sheriff's wife starts questioning things. She is approached by a kind of, I guess, like a holistic midwife, maybe. She's not like an approved doctor, and she's upset because she feels like she wasn't allowed to have a child, and she feels like it's taking so long for the sheriff and his wife because the wife is like too open minded for them. And of course then the wife is contacted by the she works in IT and is supposed to be helping keep the technology going, but also they wrangle relics too as they're found and given to judicial. And so she's contacted by this guy who's found a relic and refuses to give it up, and so she sees things on this old hard drive that start to make her question things even more. And lo and behold, she really hadn't had her birth control device removed. And so to her, this is just kind of a pack of lies that she's always felt uncomfortable with, but couldn't quite articulate. And we find out that words are so powerful that if you say in some way you want to go out, you're immediately going to go outside, and everybody thinks you're going to die because what they see on the camera that shows them what's going on outside is that it's still not safe to go out there. When people go out to clean the camera, like they go out, like I want to go out, and then they're told to clean the camera, and they do. I think the sheriff's wife says at one point that everybody who's ever gone out, even when they swore they wouldn't do that chore, they still do it. They're kind of pushed outside into certain death, and that's what appears on the camera. But then between episode one and episode two, we have the sheriff starting to kind of question things too because of the cracks he sees. And so I think that idea of like not just the surveillance, but the fact that there are people questioning. But then, of course, dystopias usually do have some sort of punishment that they do to people who don't quite fit in, right? Whether they just outright imprison them or kill them, or they send them out, to die and that sort of thing. Though you can tell when people watch them go outside to clean the camera, they want them to live. They have some sort of hope. Some people are taking bets, that sort of thing. Everything to them is about whether it's safe to get out or not. Um, and it's like, even though they think they're disciplining these people by sending them out in a way, it still kind of brings hope. And so over the course of the two episodes, as more people question it, as more cracks are seen, you see the mayor start worrying because people are trying to stockpile weapons and they're angry. And so yeah, the kind of control that they have, as happens a lot in dystopian narratives, starts to shift as more people start to question things. I'm assuming that's partially because like the sheriff's wife and then the sheriffs seem to start questioning things. Like once you have people in positions of power, like working in IT, which only a few people can do, and being law enforcement, if they question, then it gives, makes the questions a little bit more powerful in a way. Um, So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Like you were saying, like the surveillance aspect and the control, um, which happens in so many ways. But then there are people who are kind of poking at the cracks in the system. So you have this like constant, oh, I don't know, almost like underground rumbling of what could happen in this very, I mean, I hate to use the term powder keg, but this very kind of constrained situation. But yeah, I feel like I might start rambling. Am I
Well,
making sense here?
oh no, you absolutely are. I can't wait for you to finish the show so that I can say things that I can't say now that would be spoilers. But I will say this about Outside. It's even at the end of season 2, it's you're never quite clear if it's safe or not. It goes back and forth, and yeah, there's no clear cut answer about that, which one of the things I love about it is that it steadfastly refuses to tell you the answer to the one question that I think most people watching it have, which is, well, is it safe to go out or not? It refuses to tell you, but you get to work through it with the main characters as they go through discovering everything. But yeah, everything you were saying was very much making sense. I was just going to kind of step back for a second and give a little bit of a plot synopsis too for listeners who may not have listened to the or who may not have seen the show. But um, we'll say, we will have spoilers, but it is just for the first 2 episodes, so the spoilers will be minor. But as Mel said, there is on certain levels throughout the silo, it's kind of broken up into kind of 3 different groups as you go further down. Like the top section of floors, the middle section, the bottom section. But they all there's multiple shared cafeterias where the levels can go to get food, and in those cafeterias they have this big giant screen that's constantly broadcasting a feed from the camera that's positioned outside the silo. And so it looks like, it's showing this barren, dirty, desolate landscape, and you can see the bodies of the people who have gone out to clean and have died. And that's kind of the question that you were that you were mentioning, that both Holston, the sheriff, and his wife, I think her name was Allison, if I remember right, um, that's what they're both asking is that is what we're seeing on this view screen, is that the reality out there? Is it really like that, or isn't it? Is it safe out there, or isn't it? Are we being lied to or not? And yeah, I think the government of the silo very much wants to squash down these lines of thought, like you were saying, because it does lead to possible rebellion and possible death. And it's I'm trying to avoid any spoilers here, but it's unclear if the mayor of the silo knows whether or not it's safe either. And so, they well, I'm just okay. I'm gonna stop because I don't want to go down this line of thought and spoil things for you. But suffice to say, it really begs the question of, is this thing that they've been watching, is it even real or not? And like you said, saying the words "I want to go outside" is an immediate and binding contract that, yes, that's what's going to happen to you now. You are going outside, and we're going to put this suit on you to try to keep you alive in what we assume is still inhospitable, dangerous, deadly, possible nuclear radiation or disease, or it's never made clear. And the whole point is, like you said, Mel, that they give them a piece of cloth and say, we can't require you to do this, but we just ask that when you do go outside, that you clean off the lens of the camera. And, so because it gets, dirt and crud accumulated over time. And as you mentioned, every single person who's gone outside ends up cleaning the camera. And there's a lot of question about that as well. I think that's what Holston and his wife are picking at, is where are we being lied to at? Is it this feed that we're watching as we eat? Is it something else? Like what doesn't sit right? Because something doesn't sit right, something doesn't quite make sense, and they're the kind of people that don't like to leave those questions unanswered. And those are the very types of people that dystopias certainly don't want, because like you said, they breed distrust, they breed disorder, they breed anything that could, bring this carefully planned thing tumbling to the ground.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk just a tiny bit about the mayor, but I'm not trying to draw you out into giving spoilers, so don't give spoilers. But one of the things I thought was interesting is how layered and complex everything is, like you mentioned earlier, because even though I really distrust this dystopian society and I'm afraid of them, like I go back and forth. I've watched 2 episodes and I go back and forth on the mayor, because there's that part when she's talking about who fills the position of sheriff. And even that in itself is interesting. How do you do this? Like, why is it Holston? Where does this come from? And she says that traditionally, judicial wants to have one of their own people as sheriff, but that's not what they want. Like the mayor and the police force, they want to have, I guess, like a more independent sheriff, or a sheriff that's not associated with that. I thought that was interesting that um, there seems to be kind of layering and complexity even in the ruling groups, that the I don't know how much the mayor knows, and I don't want you to spoil that for me, but I'm questioning, is she just as clueless as the people, which is really fascinating as well. Like, who knows? And I mean, I guess there's also the thought process too, and I'll stop with my speculation after this, that maybe when judicial doesn't truly know what the heck is going on, but because people hang on to power for all kinds of reasons. But I did want to throw that out there, that the mayor is a lot more complex than I thought that she was going to be, as the first episode went on and into the second. But yeah, I like how you pointed out that, Allison kind of moves question by question, and then Holston joins her in the second episode, literally and figuratively. The idea of the cleaning is really interesting to me. I'm assuming that's where the wool comes from, because there's the kind of ritualistic thing where they talk about how when you go outside, if you are so led, you can pull the wool from your pouch and clean the camera so that the ones who are left behind can see what's going on. And, I had questions like, are they poisoning these people? Is it really bad outside? I don't know. But one of the things that really caught my attention, and of course caught Holston's, is that before Allison goes out, she tells him quietly, hoping that no one hears, that if she goes outside and it stinks, it's poisoned and bad, and she knows she's going to die, she'll wave to signal to him that she made a mistake and it's goodbye. And she won't clean the camera. She'll just like go off and wait to die. But if she goes outside and what she thinks she's going to see is there, like a nice, healthy world, she says she will come back to the camera and she will clean it. If she sees it's okay. And so she goes outside and she stands there, and we're watching with the people, and she comes up to the camera and she cleans the camera and she smiles. And so I'm like, she must have thought it was okay, because that's what she said she was going to do. But then again, like, you really don't know, because when Holston decides to follow her, um, it's still unclear as to what the heck is going on. And we're seeing it from a slightly different perspective at one point. but we don't get the answer. So I like this idea that you're saying that they continue to pull that thread and hold that tension, because I feel like if we knew by the end of episode 2 what was going on outside, there'd be no show, right? Like they have to still be confused. And if you're inside the silo with them, you're not going to know the answer either, right? So it'd just be too simple to show you. But I did like the fact that there's a possibility that there's something. It's not just like they're walking outside dropping dead. Like she did, there's something going on, or she wouldn't have done what she did.
Exactly. And oh god, I want you to finish watching this, like I've already said, so that we can discuss this more fully because there's so much that I want to just say, but I can't spoil it. But yeah, like you said, there's clearly something going on when people go outside, because that that's the tension that we as the viewer have to deal with, is exactly what you said. Allison tells Holston, hey, you know, I'm not going to clean if it's dangerous out there. She does clean, but then she drops dead. Like, but not immediately. Like you said, it's a gradual kind of thing. Like she starts walking, trying to go up the hill. We still have to question: is that really her that we're watching, or is this somehow fabricated? But it's presented as fact, and I'll say this as kind of a no spoiler thing. Like that is her body up on that hill. That's not giving too much away, I don't think. But there's a whole lot more that gets revealed as time goes on to show just how much, but also how little even the people in control of the silo know.
Yeah, I feel like we're starting to push into episode 2. I know I was a little bit. So I'm going to give a very kind of short summary of episode 2, and then we can talk a little bit about parts of that. So, and I think episode 2 is where we have the mayor kind of contemplating the sheriff, because of course Holston follows Allison. I think it's like 2 to 3, it's like 2 years later, I think. He's been thinking about what happened. He's been looking at her body outside the camera, because they can see the bodies of the people who dropped dead close to the silo when they left. So in episode 2, we have Holston get expelled from the silo, and we go outside with him, and we see that things are cool outside. Like it's sunny and nice. It does not look poisoned and horrible. If I'm remembering right, he does not see any of the bodies when he looks around. He goes back. I believe he cleaned. And then he starts heading toward her body, even though, like we saw, I don't think he saw her when he was looking around, but he heads in that general vicinity, and he drops dead right there. And so I don't know, it's weird because I don't feel like he saw her when he was looking around, but he's right where she is. So that's the interpretation of the people inside, is that he was going to her. If I remember right, he actually takes the helmet off. So the fact that I thought the helmets and the suits were hurting them was not right, because he still falls over. So again, we don't know what's going on. We are starting to think maybe the footage is changed because he sees something different than they do, but we also don't understand because it still seems dangerous. And then the rest of the episode, we get a bit more information about Holston's questioning. And then we have this new character, Juliet, who is an engineer who basically has started up an unsanctioned romance, a relationship, I guess you would say, with the tech guy George, who contacted Holston's wife Allison about the old tech he found that he refused to give up. And that was the tech that Allison helped him unlock and saw that it was okay outside, at least at some point and possibly now. George, in the meantime, had been going through all this tech and looking around the silo, and he finds parts of the silo that they're technically not supposed to be going into because there's signs saying it goes against the pact, which is this agreement that they're violating when they do certain things, like ask to go outside, et cetera, et cetera. And he found down underneath the digging machine that was basically digging down into the earth so they could make the silo. And there's this area where there's like graffiti, and it seems like it's probably pre bad time. And he introduces Juliet to this area. He makes his own little kind of place there where they meet up for their clandestine meetings when he doesn't go to her quarters. And he shows her that there's water at the bottom. But because of the plans that he looked at on the tech with Allison, he knows that there's a door down there somewhere, and that's his next step. And anyway, as I mentioned earlier, with the idea of like accidental death or murder, George dies in an accident in engineering when he falls off of he falls like a very long way, like over 100 feet, and dies. And so people claim it's an accident because it happened at 3 a.m. and nobody was most likely there. But Juliet is convinced that he was murdered by someone because of this knowledge that he had, because he was doing these things that are violating all the rules that they're supposed to follow. So during this episode, you have in some of the flashbacks Juliet trying to get Holston to investigate this. You see the mayor, after Holston leaves, struggling with what to do. She's afraid that violence is going to come forth because it's like it had been so long since someone had gone outside that most of the people I don't think had seen it happen. And now you have Allison and Holston within 2 years of each other. And people are taking bets and people are upset, obviously. So you see these cracks thickening, basically. We also see judicial for the first time coming down amongst the people because there's some violence that breaks out and they quickly tamp it down. So all these like dystopian vibrations, I guess, that we felt in episode 1 start getting more intense in episode 2 because you have one more apostate, right? You have one more person who gives up on them and leaves. You have the hope of the people inside, and then you also have the fear of them that they really are trapped inside there. And then you have the cracks showing in the government. But at the end of the episode, we find out that Holston wanted Juliet to replace him, which I'm assuming means he thinks she's kind of a questioner and will solve this mystery. And we find out that Juliet, even though she's terrified of the water, which kind of makes sense. I don't know how you would learn how to be around water inside a silo. Is going to continue George's investigations if she can. So I like the way episode 2 builds on the mysteries of episode 1. It doesn't like take us off in a new direction or say, here's a bunch of new mysteries to get you thinking. It's like we're still just kind of chewing on that bone of what's going on outside and how is this going to affect what's going on inside. But I have to say, you mentioned earlier, Matt, this kind of idea of the dark and griminess of it and the feeling of entrapment. And I feel like episode 2 makes you feel that kind of claustrophobia and grittiness even more because we go down into engineering, which is a part of the place that we had not seen before. And like you said earlier, they have to take care of everything to survive. Like all this equipment that's old, they have to keep it going. And we see Juliet and her team trying to keep this generator going so that they can survive. And so you have like another kind of dystopian idea as well, trying to just keep the society going, basically, with this technology, whatever they have to do. So yeah, that's my brief summary, maybe not so brief summary of episode 2, but it kind of puts us up to where we are. What did you think of the introduction? You know more than I do, but what did you think of the introduction of this Juliet character? I can tell already that she's going to be extremely important. I'm assuming the show is shifting to make her kind of the main character and the emphasis at this point.
Yes, you would be correct in that. is definitely a like kind of the principal character going forward. Rashida Jones, who people may know from Parks and Recreation, The Office, various other things she's done as well. She's kind of like the biggest name star besides Tim Robbins, who's also on the show as the head of IT. And then she dies in the first episode, and we kind of see her in the second one through flashbacks and whatnot, but then she's gone. That's not a spoiler. Since we do have episode 2 revealing that, yeah, Holston goes outside and he meets a similar fate, as far as we know. I'll say this: it does shift to Juliet as kind of the principal character, and she's played by Rebecca Ferguson, who does a fantastic job in it. She's a, she really does a good job playing this character. She was actually in the film adaptation Doctor Sleep. She was one of the head evil person in Doctor Sleep, the sequel to The Shining. So anyway, yeah, it does shift to her, but I feel like you did a great job at kind of explaining the overview of episode 2, and it really does pull deeper at this mystery of, well, like, what's at the bottom of the silo, what's below it, why is there a door down there? And I hope you like not getting answers, because you may or may not get full answers to a lot of the questions that you're having from these first 2 episodes. At least not yet. If you do read the books, you will get a much clearer picture. They're obviously still drawing things out. I believe they've already greenlit a 3rd season. They think they would be stupid not to, because it's really good. But I'm also not in charge of money at Apple TV, and have no idea how the viewership is on it. But I will be upset if they cancel this show. I'll say that much.
Oh, I think that's great that you want it to continue. I hope Apple TV listens to you. I don't know, just knowing that you're that excited about another season makes me excited to watch more. But I did have a quick question, because I figured you would know this as a person who read the book. I read an article. I'm trying to stay away from spoilers, but you know me, Matt. If I get a little bit of a spoiler, it doesn't ruin it for me. I like just watching it happen. So I was reading an article about it because I knew we were talking about it today, and they were saying, the person who wrote the article was saying that the book has, I think they said the book has like 70 or 80 chapters or something. And so the first half of the book is mainly season 1, and the second half of the first book, Wool. So they were saying the first half of Wool is the first season, and the second half of Wool, with a little bit of shift, is the second season. And then so now they're done with Wool, and they can move into the other ones if they want to, or do something new. Is that about what it is, that the first 2 seasons are basically Wool?
For the most part, I actually did look up a synopsis of Wool and the other books as well, just to kind of refamiliarize myself with the whole story. Um, I believe season 1 ends about 3/4, maybe a bit further in to Wool. There is some stuff that happens in season 2 that is continuation of the story from Wool, but yeah, by the end of season 2, it has properly concluded the first book, and um, started to kind of set the stage for what would be the adaptation of the second book, if they do greenlight another season. So if you were to read Wool, you would, I mean, you'd have the first 2 seasons spoiled, but nothing further, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. It also makes me think that if I watch the first 2 seasons relatively quickly, I could like read Wool around the same time, and it'd be a really good kind of back and forth between the two.
Sure. I think they did add some details in season 2 to expand some things that, I don't want to say that they padded the story, but it definitely was to give a little bit more story, and explore explore the story a bit more, if that makes sense. The things that they added, I thought were good and enjoyed them, but um, it's not a complete one-to-one because I feel like they did add some extra stuff. I don't know if you've seen The Last of Us, but they did a similar thing too, where there's like an entire episode in the first season that's just an exploration of a very, very small part of the video game that they devoted a full 60 minutes of the show for. So I think they're kind of doing the same thing where they're adding in more details and filling in more things, not just for time, but to help give it more more story. Well, listeners, I think that probably kind of concludes everything that we have to say. I know we're kind of on the verge of just kind of starting to repeat ourselves here, so I think we'll go ahead and call an end to this episode. If you're interested in Silo or the source material Wool, again, it comes highly recommended from me, and the first two episodes seem to come highly recommended from Mel. I would also like to add that after reading the trilogy of Wool, I did read other books by Hugh Howey as well, and was equally impressed. I think he's a really good author. I really like his stuff. I would consider myself just in general a fan. I like the topics that he writes. I like a lot of it is sci-fi adjacent and whatnot. So you should definitely check out his work as well, not just Wool. But before we completely wrap up, we do have a bit of an announcement. Just like last summer, we are going to be taking a hiatus for the summer months instead of doing a summer series. We're just going to be too hard to coordinate all of our schedules between travel and various other obligations that we have to keep a consistent schedule. So we will be taking a hiatus, but we will be back at the end of the summer, probably mid to late August or very beginning of September, much like the school season. So listeners, we look forward to seeing you for our 10th season, which, my goodness, I cannot believe that I'm saying that, which will be picking up in the fall. We are at No Fearcast on Twitter and Instagram, and we have a Facebook page as well. Our email is nofearcast@gmail.com. If you love what we're doing, please consider supporting us on Patreon. We also have merchandise available at our website, nofearcast.com, or simply rate and review us, which is entirely free and helps others listeners find us. Theme music by Nicholas Gasparini, and we will be back at the end of our hiatus with a brand new episode.